Named as global wars, World Wars I and II are probably the most known wars among countries in world history. But if somebody's going to ask you, what happened in World War I, and why did it even start to begin with? Will you know the answers to those questions? If not, then don't worry. Together, let's explore World War I, its causes, key events, and aftermath. Hi, welcome to our channel. This is Eventful Insights, and today we bring you another interesting episode on the World War. We've had a few videos about World War II, so now let's go back in time a bit more and get to know the First World War. Together, let's answer the questions from what caused World War I to how did World War I end? Before we begin, how would you assess your knowledge of World War I? If you've learned about it from school, would you say you're familiar enough with it? Tell us in the comments below. Now let's begin. World War I, which happened from 1914 to 1918, showed the world how awful trench fighting and new deadly weapons like poison gas and tanks could be. It caused incredibly devastating loss of life, with over 16 million people, including soldiers and civilians, dying. The war also changed the map a lot. It led to the end of big empires like the Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman and Russian ones that had been around for ages. New countries took their place. Even after the fighting stopped, there was still a lot of political and social chaos that eventually led to an even bigger and deadlier war 20 years later. The whole war started when the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, got assassinated in 1914. But historians say the war was actually the result of various factors building up over many years. Starting back in the late 1800s, there were mistakes and actions taken that had much bigger consequences than anyone expected. So, to get a better understanding of why World War I started, let's explore the events that led to this first global war. For centuries, European empires and kingdoms constantly fought each other over land, colonies, religion, resources, and power struggles. This led to frequent changes in borders across the continent. However, after French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, who had conquered much of Europe, was defeated, representatives from several European powers wanted to stop the cycle of war. They met in Vienna in 1814 and 1815 to make a plan for peace. What emerged was a set of agreements known as the Concert of Europe, aiming to maintain peace by supporting existing ruling families instead of revolutionary movements. With peace established, Europe experienced a century of significant progress and global influence. Technological advancements like machine production, steel, electricity, and modern chemistry improved the continent's wealth. Meanwhile, advancements in transportation and weaponry allowed countries to extend their power worldwide. Consequently, Europe's strongest empires, such as Belgium, Britain, France, the Netherlands, Portugal, and later Germany, Italy, and Russia, dominated much of the world during the 1800s. After the Napoleonic Wars, Europe maintained a delicate balance of power, with the strongest nations generally avoiding large conflicts with each other. This equilibrium was sustained because Europe's major powers were relatively evenly matched in strength, making the costs of war outweigh the benefits. Initially, Austria, Britain, and Russia ensured peace and stability on the continent. Later, Britain and Prussia, which would become part of Germany in 1871, upheld this balance as the dominant nations in Europe. Both countries had large populations, strong economies, and powerful militaries. However, in the latter half of the 19th century, power dynamics shifted. Britain, once the world's largest empire with unmatched naval and economic power, saw its relative strength decline. While it had enjoyed global dominance through trade, navy, and empire, maintaining such a vast empire became increasingly costly. Additionally, rapidly industrializing countries like the United States and Germany began to surpass Britain economically and technologically. Germany emerged as an independent nation in 1871 through the unification led by Otto von Bismarck. Previously divided into numerous states, Germany quickly became wealthy through industrialization and expanded its influence by acquiring colonies in Africa. But Great Britain, Germany, and France were competitors in the economic exploitation of Africa. Therefore, Germany's actions in Africa raised concerns for Britain and France, prompting them to put aside their differences in the region to safeguard their interests. They feared that Germany's activities were disrupting the established colonial order and sought to maintain their dominance in Africa. Although Bismarck initially worked to maintain peace by balancing power among other nations, subsequent German leaders, notably Kaiser Wilhelm II, pursued aggressive policies to assert German dominance. Wilhelm's ambition for German economic and military supremacy led to reckless actions, such as abandoning treaties and aggressively expanding the military, sparking an arms race in Europe and upsetting the continent's balance of power. And so, the era of European peace and prosperity didn't last forever. Many historians believe that by the mid-1800s, things started to unravel. Various regional conflicts and wars to unify Germany and Italy brought back costly warfare to the continent. Ultimately, Europe's century of stability came to a dramatic end with World War I. Therefore, this was a time where the power of a nation was judged by its wealth, territory, and the size of its military forces. Many leaders believed that a strong military was essential for a nation to achieve its political and economic goals, a concept known as militarism. Most countries had compulsory military service, where young men underwent training and then served as reserves. Naval spending increased annually, especially in Great Britain and Germany. To avoid being isolated in case of war, major military alliances formed. Germany allied with Austria-Hungary, while Russia and France formed a similar pact. In the 1900s, several European nations had large empires spanning the globe, giving them control over vast territories. Before World War I, the British and French empires were the most influential, colonizing areas like India, parts of Vietnam, and regions in West and North Africa. This expansion of European nations as empires, also known as imperialism, played a significant role in causing World War I. As countries like Britain and France expanded their empires, it heightened tensions among European nations. These tensions arose because many colonies were acquired through force or coercion. Once conquered, these territories were governed by the imperial nation. Often, these colonies were exploited for resources by their mother countries, leading to widespread dissatisfaction and resentment. As British and French imperialism continued, tensions escalated among opposing empires, including Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. This ultimately led to the formation of two major alliances during World War I: the Allied powers, consisting of Britain and France, and the Central powers, including Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. Ultimately, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 in Sarajevo sparked World War I, as Austria-Hungary invaded Serbia, triggering a chain reaction due to the military alliances across Europe. The war quickly escalated into a global conflict due to the numerous colonies held by European nations. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand sparked a conflict between Russia and the Habsburg Austria-Hungarian Empire. But why did this local conflict escalate into a world war? Some historians suggest that the answer lies in deeper historical trends. Firstly, there's the alliance system. As mentioned earlier, in this formation of alliances, nations pledged to support each other. The goal was to maintain a balance of power in Europe. This resulted in two major alliances: the Triple Entente, led by Russia and France, with Great Britain later joining, and the Triple Alliance, including Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Italy, later joined by the Ottoman Empire, collectively known as the Central Powers. These alliances virtually ensured that if a conflict erupted between Russia and Austria-Hungary, their allies would be drawn in, significantly enlarging the scale of the war. The Triple Entente specifically created significant tensions among nations. Germany perceived this alliance encircling them as a threat to their power and very existence. Furthermore, nationalism, which was rapidly growing in many parts of the world, played a significant role in fueling the war. Serbian nationalism in particular was a key factor in the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and the outbreak of World War I. Serbian nationalism had been developing since the mid to late 1800s, but two specific events are directly linked to the war's beginning. During the 1800s, Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro and Greece broke away from the Ottoman Empire and formed an alliance known as the Balkan League, backed by Russia. Their goal was to seize more territory from the remaining Ottoman holdings in the Balkans. Tensions in Europe nearly erupted into war in 1908 when Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia, frustrating Serbia. Serbia began mobilizing its army with Russian support, prompting Germany to threaten war in defense of Austria-Hungary. In response, Russia and Serbia backed down to avoid conflict. These tensions led many nations to develop detailed military mobilization plans. Germany, considering the possibility of a war on two fronts, devised the von Schlieffen plan in 1905. This plan aimed to swiftly defeat France before Russia could respond by invading France through Belgium to bypass French border defenses. Despite Britain's formal guarantee of Belgian neutrality since 1839, Germany believed Britain would not risk war to defend Belgium. In the First Balkan War of 1912, Serbia, Greece and Montenegro successfully defeated Ottoman forces, forcing them to agree to a ceasefire. However, the Balkan League quickly fell apart, leading to the Second Balkan War. In this conflict, Bulgaria fought against Greece and Serbia over control of Macedonia, with the Ottoman Empire and Romania also joining in against Bulgaria. Ultimately, Bulgaria was defeated. The Balkan Wars intensified the region's instability. With the Ottoman Empire's decline, tensions increased between Serbia and Austria-Hungary. This prompted Austria-Hungary and its ally, Germany, to believe that a war with Serbia would be necessary to strengthen Austria-Hungary's position. Many historians view the Balkan Wars as the true beginning of World War I. Going back to the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke, who was set to inherit the Austria-Hungarian throne, travelled to Sarajevo to inspect the imperial troops stationed in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He and his wife, Sophie, were shot dead in their car by a 19-year-old Serbian revolutionary named Gavrilo Princip. The assassination underscored the nationalism tearing apart the Austria-Hungarian Empire. Serbian extremists wanted Franz Ferdinand dead because they feared he would advocate for power sharing that would keep Slavic peoples within the empire. His assassination dashed any hopes of such an arrangement and fueled Serbian defiance and Austrian determination to address the nationalism issue, particularly regarding Serbia. The crisis escalated tensions among European powers as they took different sides. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, declared war on Serbia on July 28th. Russia, seeing itself as Serbia's protector, mobilized its military in response. Germany, not wanting to face both Russia and France simultaneously, declared war on Russia on August 1st and on France 2 days later. German forces planned to invade France through neutral Belgium, prompting Belgium to seek help. On August 4th, Great Britain declared war on Germany, and thus World War I began. There were sure a lot of factors that contributed to the war, but so far, what do you think was the event that truly helped prepare the stage for World War I? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. If you're interested in watching other videos about world history, you might want to check out our channel. Now let's continue. Serbia faced a dilemma. Accepting Austria-Hungary's ultimatum would mean surrendering its sovereignty, while rejecting it would likely lead to war. Serbia agreed to all terms of the ultimatum, except for allowing Austro-Hungarian officials to participate in the investigation of the assassination. Despite Serbia's partial acceptance, Austria-Hungary rejected the reply and declared war on Serbia on July 28th. Austria-Hungary was determined to take decisive action against Serbia, even at the risk of war with Russia, Serbia's ally. With the assurance of German support, Austria-Hungary was willing to risk a broader European conflict. This escalation in the Balkans threatened to engulf all of Europe in war. By the summer of 1914, Germany had formulated a single war plan to defeat France first, then confront Russia. While German politicians viewed the Balkan crisis of 1914 as an opportunity to weaken Russia and France diplomatically, German military leaders feared Russia's expanding military strength and advocated for a preemptive strike. On July 30th, Russia ordered its forces to prepare for war. While Russia saw this mobilization as a precautionary measure, Germany perceived it as a hostile act against itself and Austria-Hungary. Germany's war strategy relied on swiftly defeating France before Russia could fully mobilize its army. On July 31st, Germany issued an ultimatum to Russia demanding demobilization. When Russia did not respond by the deadline the next day, Germany declared war on Russia and initiated its own general mobilization. France, anticipating German invasion, stood firm in its commitment to support Russia. Many in France also hoped that war would address long-standing grievances with Germany dating back to the 1870s. Germany declared war on France on August 3rd. Throughout the crisis, Russia and France pressured Britain to declare its support. However, under its agreements with Russia and France, Britain had no obligation to join the conflict. During the first month of combat, bold attacks and swift troop movements occurred on both the western and eastern fronts. In the west, Germany initiated attacks on Belgium and subsequently France. In the east, Russia launched offensives against both Germany and Austria-Hungary. Meanwhile, Austria-Hungary launched an attack on Serbia in the south. After the Battle of the Marne in September 1914, the Western Front became entrenched in central France and remained static for the duration of the war. Similarly, the fronts in the east also solidified over time. The Germans had pushed to within 30 miles of Paris, but in the following 2 days, the French received reinforcement from 6,000 infantrymen transported to the front by hundreds of taxis. The Germans entrenched themselves north of the Aisne River, marking the beginning of the trench warfare that characterized the Western Front for the next 4 years. In late 1914, the Ottoman Empire entered the war after Germany deceived Russia into believing that Turkey had initiated an attack. Consequently, much of 1915 saw Allied efforts directed against the Ottomans in the Mediterranean region. Initially, Britain and France launched an unsuccessful assault on the Dardanelles. Subsequently, the British invaded the Gallipoli Peninsula. Additionally, Britain initiated a separate campaign against the Turks in Mesopotamia. While the British achieved some victories in Mesopotamia, the campaigns at Gallipoli and the Dardanelles ended in defeat for the British forces. The middle phase of the war, spanning 1916 and 1917, was characterized by ongoing trench warfare on both the eastern and western fronts. Soldiers engaged in combat from fortified positions, using machine guns, heavy artillery, and chemical weapons. Despite millions of casualties and the harsh conditions faced by soldiers, neither side achieved significant success or gained a clear advantage. The First Battle of the Aisne signalled the start of trench warfare on the Western Front. With neither side having sufficient manpower for frontal assaults, they resorted to attempting to outflank each other. This led to the race to the sea, where both sides extended their trench networks northwestward towards the Atlantic coast, reaching the Belgian coast near Ostend. Despite the deadlock on both European fronts, two significant events unfolded in 1917 during the war. In early April, following attacks on its ships in the Atlantic, the United States declared war on Germany. The United States' entry into World War I marked a crucial turning point as it enabled the eventual defeat of Germany. In 1916, it was anticipated that if the United States joined the war, it would support the Allies with supplies and significant financial assistance. These expectations were met and exceeded. The United States not only produced weapons for its own use, but also supplied France and Great Britain. This economic contribution was pivotal. By April 1, 1917, the Allies had depleted their resources to pay for essential supplies from the United States. Without American involvement, it's hard to imagine how they could have sustained the war effort. American loans totaling $7 billion between 1917 and the war's end ensured the continuous flow of U.S. arms and food across the Atlantic. Then, in November, the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia led to the withdrawal of Russia from the conflict. In March 1917, also called the Russian Revolution, it marked the end of Imperial Russia's autocratic monarchy, replaced by a provisional government. However, this government's authority was immediately challenged by Soviets, representing workers' and soldiers' councils, who claimed to represent the masses and lead the revolution. The March Revolution had far-reaching implications. It was seen as a military setback by the Western Allies and an opportunity by the Central Powers. While the Russian army continued to fight against the Central Powers, its morale was low, and the Russian people were weary of a war they were ill-prepared for. The army faced issues of inadequate armament, supplies, training and leadership, resulting in a series of defeats. Soviet propaganda, notably Order No. 1 of the Petrograd Soviet, further eroded discipline among already demoralized troops. In 1918, both sides launched renewed offensives in a desperate bid to secure victory in the war. However, these efforts proved unsuccessful, and the fighting persisted between exhausted and demoralized troops. Despite some initial gains, the Germans faced setbacks in individual battles and slowly began to retreat. Additionally, a deadly outbreak of influenza inflicted heavy casualties on soldiers from both sides. Meanwhile, internal unrest grew within the military structures of both Germany and Austria-Hungary, leading to multiple mutinies and a loss of control by their respective governments. In early September 1918, the Austro-Hungarian government proposed a peace conference on neutral ground, but the United States rejected this idea, citing the principles outlined in President Woodrow Wilson's speeches. However, when Austria-Hungary requested an armistice based on those same principles after Bulgaria's collapse on October 4th, the U.S. response on October 18th indicated a commitment to the Czechoslovaks and Yugoslavs, who sought more than the autonomy previously suggested. The dissolution of Austria-Hungary accelerated rapidly. On October 24th, a Hungarian National Council advocating peace and separation from Austria was formed in Budapest. On October 27th, Vienna sent a note to Washington accepting the U.S. position from October 18th, which went unacknowledged. Meanwhile, in Prague, the Czechoslovak Committee passed legislation for an independent state on October 28th, while a similar Polish committee in Kraków aimed to incorporate Galicia and Austrian Silesia into Poland. On October 29th, Croats in Zagreb declared parts of Croatia independent, pending the establishment of a national state for Slovenes, Croats and Serbs. Finally, On October 30th, German members of the Reichsrat in Vienna declared an independent state of German Austria. An armistice between the Allies and Austria-Hungary was signed at Villa Giusti near Padua on November 3, 1918, effective from November 4th. Its terms required Austria-Hungary's forces to withdraw from all territory occupied since August 1914 and cede additional territories. All German forces were to leave Austria-Hungary within 15 days or be interned, and the Allies were granted control over most of Austria-Hungary's warships and internal communications. The late fall of 1918 saw the end of the war as one by one, the member countries of the Central Powers signed armistice agreements. Germany was the last to sign, on November 11, 1918. These agreements led to the dissolution of Austria-Hungary into several smaller nations. The armistice terms, presented to Germany in the railway carriage at Rethonde under the Treaty of Versailles, were strict. Germany was obligated to evacuate not only Belgium, France, and Alsace-Lorraine, but also all remaining territories on the left bank of the Rhine. Additionally, Germany had to demilitarize the right bank of the Rhine, from the Netherlands to Switzerland. German troops in East Africa were to surrender, while those in Eastern Europe were to retreat to the pre-war German borders. The treaties of Brest-Litovsk and Bucharest were to be invalidated, and Germany was required to repatriate all prisoners of war and surrender a significant quantity of war materials, including artillery, machine guns, aircraft, locomotives, and railroad cars. Furthermore, the Allied blockade of Germany was to remain in place. In hindsight, many historians view the Allies' treatment of Germany as excessively harsh and believe that the Treaty of Versailles contributed to the outbreak of World War II rather than promoting peace. The treaty's unjust declaration blaming Germany entirely for the war humiliated the German people. Additionally, imposing significant war reparations intended to make Germany bear the financial cost of the war worsened existing economic strain. Despite Germany paying only a fraction of the reparations owed, the burden fueled widespread resentment and provided fertile ground for extremist groups like the Nazi Party to exploit the situation and gain political control in the years that followed. The casualties incurred during World War I far surpassed those of previous conflicts, with approximately 8,500,000 soldiers succumbing to wounds or disease. Artillery inflicted the greatest number of casualties, followed by small arms and poison gas. Surprisingly, the bayonet, once considered the decisive weapon by the pre-war French army, resulted in relatively few casualties. The war saw increasing mechanization from 1914 onwards, leading to casualties even during periods of relative calm. On the Western Front, hundreds of Allied and German soldiers could perish on a quiet day. The deadliest single day of the war, July 1, 1916, during the Battle of the Somme, when the British Army suffered 57,470 casualties. Ultimately, World War I led to the downfall of four major empires: the Austro-Hungarian, German, Ottoman, and Russian empires. Following the war, the victorious nations annexed territories from these collapsed empires. Britain and France, for instance, partitioned land formerly belonging to the Ottoman Empire. Additionally, the dissolution of these empires led to the establishment of new nations in Europe, such as Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, alongside the resurgence of older ones, like Poland. With Europe's victors left severely weakened by the conflict, global power began shifting towards the United States. Even prior to the war, the US had overtaken Britain to become the world's leading economy. Post-war, America's position strengthened further. In 1919, the US was uniquely positioned to shape the New World Order. However, despite this opportunity, the nation hesitated to assume a leadership role. as the American public showed little interest in international affairs at the time. Instead, the country opted for a period of isolationism. And that's it. That was World War I. After watching this video, what do you think is to blame for World War I? Tell us your opinions in the comments below. If you enjoyed watching this video, give it a like, hit subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Thanks for watching.